My wife called my brother a dropout. I stopped paying her $3,000 per month student loan. I used to think the ultimate act of love was bleeding yourself dry so the person you loved could touch the sky. I honestly believed that. For 4 years, I wore my exhaustion like a badge of honor, convincing myself that the dark circles under my eyes and the constant, dull ache in my lower back were simply the price of admission for a beautiful future. I didn't scream when the truth finally hit me. I didn't throw plates against the wall. I just sat at our kitchen island, staring at a half-empty glass of Cabernet, and realized that the woman whose dreams I had literally purchased with my sweat viewed me and my bloodline as nothing more than the help. My name is Mark. I'm 32 years old, and until a rainy Thursday night in October, I thought I was part of a partnership. My wife, Sarah, is a doctor, an anesthesiologist to be exact. Getting to that title took a decade of her life, a tremendous amount of intellect, and exactly $240,000 in student loan debt. When we got married, she was just starting her residency, drowning in a sea of federal and private loans. The interest alone was a living, breathing monster that threatened to consume any hope we had of buying a house or starting a family. So I made a choice. I was a logistics manager for a regional freight company, a decent salary, but nothing that would slay a $250,000 dragon. So I picked up a second job. Every night from 7 p.m. to 1 a.m., I worked remotely doing freelance database management and data entry. I gave up my weekends. I gave up my hobbies. Every single cent from that second job, plus a massive chunk of my primary salary, roughly $3,000 a month, went directly to her loan servicer. For 4 years, I didn't miss a single payment. I watched her loan balance drop while I watched my own youth slip away in the reflection of my dual monitors. Sarah never asked me to do it, but she never told me to stop either. She accepted the $3,000 a month the way a queen accepts a tax. Graciously, but as if it were her natural right. I told myself it was for us. Her degree was our degree. Her success was our success. That illusion violently shattered the night my younger brother, Tommy, came over for dinner. Tommy is a carpenter. He doesn't have a college degree. He works with his hands, wears steel-toed boots that smell like sawdust and honest labor, and has a laugh that can fill a room. He had recently been laid off from a larger construction firm and was trying to start his own independent contracting business. It was a terrifying leap for him. As we sat around our dining table, picking at the roast chicken Sarah had prepared, Tommy looked down at his plate, twisting his napkin. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. He cleared his throat and asked, his voice thick with embarrassment, if I could loan him $500. He needed a specific compound sliding miter saw to take on a lucrative custom cabinetry job that would essentially launch his business. He promised to pay me back with his first deposit, with interest. Before I could even open my mouth to say yes, Sarah set her wine glass down. The clink of the crystal against the wood was sharp, deliberate. Tommy, she said, her voice dripping with that careful, practiced empathy doctors use to deliver bad news. We really can't. We have strict financial goals. And to be perfectly honest, our money isn't a charity fund for people who didn't care enough to get a degree and secure a stable career. You need to learn how to budget for your own choices. The room went completely dead. The silence was so heavy it felt hard to breathe. I looked at Tommy. His face had gone bright red, a mixture of profound humiliation and shame. He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, pushed his plate away, and muttered an apology. He left 10 minutes later, claiming he had an early morning. I sat back in my chair and looked at my wife, the woman I had loved for 7 years. She picked up her fork and took a bite of her chicken, completely unbothered, as if she had just swatted a fly. She didn't see a hard-working man asking for a lifeline. She saw a peasant begging for scraps. Your money, I asked quietly, my voice eerily calm. Our money, Mark, she corrected smoothly, not looking up. We can't be bailing out high school dropouts. We have my loans, the mortgage, our future. We have to be smart. In that specific, terrifying moment, something inside my chest snapped. It wasn't a loud break. It was the quiet, structural collapse of a building whose foundation had rotted away. I realized that to Sarah, her massive, suffocating medical debt was a noble burden that I was privileged to help carry. But my brother's request for $500, a fraction of what I silently poured into her account every single week, was a pathetic handout. She looked down on him because he worked with his hands, completely blind to the fact that it was my calloused, overworked hands typing until 1:00 a.m. that bought the designer scrubs she wore to the hospital. "You're right," I said simply. "We have to be smart." Sarah smiled, pleased that I had seen reason. She had no idea that she had just handed me the exact tool I needed to dismantle her reality. I didn't sleep that night. I went down to my home office, the room where I had traded 4 years of my life for her peace of mind. I opened my laptop. The glow of the screen felt different tonight. I logged into Mohila, her student loan servicer. I pulled up the payment history. There they were, rows and rows of green text. $3,000, $3,000, $3,000, $144,000 in total, all from my checking account. Not a single dime from her residency salary had gone toward her own debt. She used her money for her leased BMW, her luxury gym memberships, and her networking dinners. With a few clicks, I deleted my bank routing information from the autopay settings. I canceled the recurring transfer. The screen flashed a warning about impending interest and penalties if payments lapsed. I clicked Confirm. Then, I opened a new tab and navigated to my local credit union. I opened a high-yield savings account in my name. I initiated a transfer of $500 into it. The next morning, on my way to my primary job, I stopped by a hardware store, bought the exact DeWalt miter saw Tommy needed, and drove it to his tiny apartment. I left it on his porch with a note. "Consider this an investment in a man who actually knows how to build things. Go get M. Mark." For the next 29 days, I lived a double life. I continued working my day job, but I quit my night gig. For the first time in 4 years, I slept 8 hours a night. I watched television. I read a book. When Sarah asked why I wasn't in the office at midnight, I casually mentioned that my freelance contract had ended. She barely registered the information, too busy complaining about a nurse at her hospital who didn't know her place. She didn't ask how we would afford her loan payments, because in her mind, my money was an infinite resource dedicated solely to her comfort. The fallout didn't arrive with a phone call. It arrived in the mail. 35 days after the dinner, I was sitting on the couch reading when Sarah walked in from the mailbox. Her face was pale, her jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. She threw a thick, red-stamped envelope onto the coffee table. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice shaking, not with sadness, but with absolute, unadulterated rage. I glanced at the envelope. It was a past-due notice from her loan servicer. The grace period had ended. The interest had compounded. "It looks like a bill," I said evenly, turning the page of my book. "Don't play stupid with me, Mark," she screamed, the polished, empathetic doctor persona completely evaporating. My autopay bounced. The servicer says the account was unlinked. My credit score just took a hit. Why didn't you fix the routing number when your freelance gig ended? I closed my book and placed it gently on the table. I looked up at her, feeling a strange, intoxicating rush of absolute clarity. "I didn't fix it because it isn't broken," I said. "I removed my account." Sarah stared at me, her eyes darting frantically as her brain tried to process a scenario that defied her arrogance. You stopped paying my loans? Without telling me? Are you out of your mind? Do you know how much the monthly minimum is?" $3,112, I recited perfectly. "I know exactly how much it is, Sarah. I've paid it 48 times. "Then why would you stop?" she yelled, her hands trembling. "We are a team. You are jeopardizing my financial standing. I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. When you hold the absolute truth, you don't need volume. I walked over to the side table, picked up a manila folder I had prepared a week prior, and handed it to her. She opened it defensively. Inside was a spreadsheet detailing every single payment I had made over the last 4 years, totaling $144,000. We aren't a team, Sarah, I said, my voice dropping an octave, heavy with years of suppressed exhaustion. A team supports each other. When my brother needed $500 to build a future, you looked him in the eye and called him a dropout looking for charity. You told me that our money wasn't for people who didn't have degrees. She scoffed, trying to deflect. This is about Tommy? You're ruining my credit over a high school dropout's hobby. No. I stepped closer, closing the distance between us until she was forced to look directly into my eyes. This is about me, because the only reason you have the luxury of looking down on blue-collar workers is because a man without an Ivy League degree worked 80 hours a week to fund your elitism. You think you're entirely self-made? You think your degree makes you superior? My sweat paid for that superiority. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. For the first time in our marriage, she was looking at the actual math of her own privilege. You said we need to budget for our own choices, I continued, echoing her exact words from that dinner. Well, going to medical school was your choice. Taking out $250,000 in loans was your choice. From this exact second forward, you will budget for it yourself. My primary salary covers my half of the mortgage and the bills. The rest is mine. If you want to keep driving that leased BMW, I suggest you ask the hospital for extra shifts. You can't do this, she whispered, the anger finally breaking, replaced by the terrifying realization of the debt that was now sitting squarely on her own shoulders. I can't afford $3,000 a month on top of my car and my expenses. I'll drown. Then I guess you'd better learn how to swim, I replied softly. I walked out of the living room, leaving her standing there with the folder in her hands, the crushing weight of her own reality finally settling around her. The aftermath of that day didn't end in an immediate divorce, but it fundamentally fractured the false reality our marriage was built on. Sarah had to return her leased BMW and buy a used Honda. She had to cancel her luxury gym membership. She started picking up grueling weekend shifts at the hospital just to meet her minimum loan payments. The exhaustion she used to watch me endure became her daily companion. We walk around our house now like two roommates bound by a mortgage, speaking only in logistical necessities. She suggested couples counseling, and I agreed to go, but I made it clear that my financial boundaries were permanent. As for Tommy, that $500 saw changed his life. His custom cabinetry business took off. 6 months after I bought him that tool, he showed up at my house while Sarah was at the hospital. He handed me an envelope with $500 in cash and a bottle of expensive bourbon. I told you I'd pay you back with interest, he laughed, pulling me into a massive hug. I took the bourbon but slid the envelope back into his work jacket. Keep it, I told him. Put it toward the next tool. He looked at me, confused but deeply grateful. He had no idea that the $500 wasn't just a loan. It was the price I paid to buy back my self-respect, my freedom, and my peace of mind. And honestly, it was the best investment I ever made.